Hello, and welcome back to my classroom. Today we're going to be talking about strength-based sentence frames. So this is kind of the second part of the watch and reads for this week. And this one we are going to cover what we mean when we say we're using deficit thinking to describe student work, and then how we can kind of reframe that to empower students to exercise those rights of the learner that we discussed and to come at our instruction from a positive strength-based viewpoint, meaning that we're understanding what the student knows and then building on it rather than just identifying the things they don't know. So I wanted to first open this up by talking about group-worthy tasks. So you may or may not have heard this word or phrase before, group-worthy tasks. But the whole basis of this is that we all have individual strengths, and when we bring them together to solve a problem, the strength is greater than if we tried to do it individually. So this is also sometimes called complex instruction, or it builds on the idea of complex instruction or utilizes it. So here are some of the main things that you want to think about when you're thinking about whether or not you're using complex instruction and group-worthy tasks. So group-worthy tasks actually just build on this idea. So it's designing a task that allows students to engage in this way using complex instruction. So it's kind of all intermingled, but those like specific definitions right now for you are really not that important. It's more the idea of, are we using these tenets to kind of guide our instruction, if that makes sense. So if you don't know the exact definition for complex instruction and the exact definition for group-worthy tasks, that's okay. It's kind of the spirit of the thing that we're getting at. And all of these kind of like research-based ideas contribute to this understanding. So everyone should have an opportunity to contribute. So and we'll talk about how to do that in just a moment. Teachers should have high expectations while providing entry points for students that have different experiences. So a good example of this is something like the cookie task, where you choose a picture of objects that is appropriate for their grade level, and maybe even a little challenging, right? Or you have an extension up, and there's lots of different ways to solve it. So you've got this high expectation of like, I believe you can do this kind of difficult mental math. And there's lots of different ways to do it, and we can share those. And also multiple opportunities to contribute. So are you allowing students to write what they understand, speak what they understand, use like a thumbs up or thumbs down, use a whiteboard? So there's all these different ways that students can demonstrate their understanding. Are you allowing them or giving opportunities for all those different ways of showing what they understand? And then lastly, part of that is assigning competence using a strength-based sentence stem, which is kind of going to be at the end of our presentation and will definitely come into play when you're thinking about your mock parent-teacher conference and really kind of all of your assignments throughout the semester, and hopefully in your classroom. So what is a group-worthy task? I wanted to throw it back to the Minions video that we watched the first week of class to kind of think about what a group-worthy task is. So one thing, this is a silly video, but one thing I like about it is that all of the Minions are contributing, right? They're working together to complete a task. They all have a role. So you've got the one who's like actually spinning the light bulb, but the others are kind of driving the car, if you know what I mean, metaphorically. You've got the guy off to the side who could be kind of like a manager type. So even though it's kind of a silly video, it's kind of good for showing this. And they're kind of all succeeding in getting this done together. And if they, aren't able to solve it, then they're kind of doing that together too. And there's value in both of those things. All right, so how do we do this? So we develop group-worthy problem-solving tasks by engaging in tasks that have these four these four characteristics, and these should look familiar. So problems should be open-ended with multiple solutions, no clear solution strategy, and they should be able to be extended up or down. So these you heard in class a bunch a few weeks ago. So again, just same kind of thing. So an appropriate task that's actually a problem-solving task and therefore has these four things as a start. Then on top of that, you can give everyone a role. So not only just throwing the problem out there, but also giving each student in the group a job. So if you have 3 students in the group, maybe you have one that's the recorder, one that's the thinking pusher, and one that's the reporter. And you have to define those roles for the students. But if everyone has a job, then you're going to get a more minion-like engagement in the task instead of just one person dominating, if that makes sense. And you can actually give students intentionally a job that might be challenging for them because it's important for them to build those skills. So maybe it's giving a student who's typically quieter the reporter role, or maybe it's giving a student who's typically dominant the recorder role. And defining that as something that where they have to record the other students' thinking, right? So resource manager would mean they're responsible for materials. The thinking pusher means they're responsible for kind of asking good questions or asking people to justify their solutions, that kind of thing. An equity officer would mean they're making sure there's equitable participation among the group. Recorder obviously is the person who writes down what's going to be reported, and the reporter speaks and shares the solution. So those are just some ideas. There's a million ideas out there, but these are just examples. So again, everyone in a group worthy task should have an opportunity to contribute, to be seen as smart. So that's where those multiple solutions and multiple entry points come in. Without those, there's only one way to be smart, right? So multiple ways to solve the problem. And they should support each other in their mathematical thinking. So they are the holders of the knowledge and they are using it to solve this problem, even if it's extension of what they already know, kind of, but it's not the teacher just telling them how to solve it. So again, kind of building on what we know about good tasks. Okay, so again, these are more examples of the group work roles. So these are some of the ones I just talked about. You're welcome to pause here and look at these or reflect back on them. But if you can make little tasks or roll cards like this for students, and you can laminate them and use them throughout the year and kind of switch them up, or put them in groups of 5. And then if you have groups of 5, everybody gets a different role each time. You can even allow students to select their role, but it gets a little dicey depending on your class because sometimes they want the same role. Or just make sure you're rotating them so everybody gets a chance to do each thing. So they get a chance to do what they're good at and they get a chance to grow in an area where they might want to or need to. All right, so I want to take a moment now and we're going to kind of build on this. So we're thinking about developing a group worthy task, assigning roles, and now we need to think about what we're going to see when we do that. So we're going to see students solving problems in different ways. We're going to see student work that's kind of all different and all over the place. And our job as a teacher is to notice what those mathematical ideas are so we can then build on them and use them in our instruction. Okay, so this all is kind of like meant to build on each thing and think about the different layers that you have to attend to as a teacher. So this idea of noticing is going to lead us into the idea of strength-based sentence frames. Okay, so this is going to be our scenario for noticing. Suppose you give a 3rd grade child the task of writing a multiplication problem using the numbers 3 and 5. So that's a super open-ended problem. There's lots of different solutions. There's no clear way to do it really. Then after that, you get 3 written responses as a teacher. You're going to review the responses and write down what you notice about the child's thinking. Okay, so that's kind of the context for what we're about to see. So this is student A. I hope if I move myself over, y'all can see this. But it says multiplication 5, 3. Ashley has 5 apples. There's B apples in each group, and you can see the rest. So I want you to pause here, and I want you to notice something about the child's learning. Okay, so what do you notice when you look at this? And are there any claims you can make about what they do know? So what kinds of things, do you see evidence that they understand some concept or idea here? And what is that? Okay, so I'm going to pause it here and ask you to explain what you notice and what claims you can make about what they know. Okay, here's student B. So at the top, it says multiplication 5, 3. My mom gave me 5 dimes, or that might be 5 dimes, and you can see the rest. Okay. So again, we're going to pause here, and I want you to think about what you notice about the child's thinking and any claims you might make about what they know. So what understandings are they demonstrating? That's what we're focusing on. All right, and lastly, our student C, I think you can see this whole thing. If you can't, the first line says Sarah had 5 apples and she shared them with 3 friends. And then how many did each friend get? Okay, so again, pause here. What did you notice about the child's thinking and what claims can you make about what they know? All right, so I want to start here with a sample response from a teacher. Okay, so this would be a teacher who did just what you did, and they're kind of writing down what they're noticing about this child's solution. So we're back now to the first student. This is student C, excuse me, sorry. Student C, and this is what they wrote. So I want you to pause and I want you to read this response over here that the teacher gave. Okay, so some things, I put a frowny face here because some things you might notice here are kind of the deficit thinking that we see. So this I'm sorry, going back here just so you can see it, but here it's kind of just a factual thing here, but then it's the error lies within being able to construct the proper word problem. So they've noticed kind of like what the solution is doing and then found the error. Okay, so we don't see any evidence of what the student does understand or the good things the student has done here. And hopefully when you looked at it, you identified some positive things the student is understanding. Like this picture is a really nice way to illustrate what their thinking is. And maybe just asking some good questions would get them to connect the dots here a little bit. Okay, so here's another one. So take a pause just for a moment and read this one. Okay, so again, this kind of illustrates some deficit thinking because this teacher is focused on, again, where the errors lie. So they're thinking about, here's kind of what they did, but here's all the mistakes they made. So it's a very deficit-oriented response. And this is like common as a teacher. I'm not saying that this is like unusual or bad, necessarily. It's just more that we want to be thinking about our students in terms of the positive things and the assets they bring to the classroom. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. Are there ways that you can kind of shift your mindset to think about what does the student understand and then how can I build on that in my instruction instead of here's all the things they don't understand, I'm going to fix it, right? Research shows that mindset doesn't really work. Like if we have students who are failing standardized tests and we just put them in more math, that's exactly the same kind of instruction, it does not help. So really finding what they do know and being able to build on that is what's going to have the biggest impact on not only their math ability, but their self-esteem and their vision of themselves as a mathematician and as a learner. All right, so this is an example of a strength-based approach. So I want you to, again, pause here and just think about what you notice here that's different in terms of a strength-based approach as opposed to the two that we just saw. So let's pause here. Okay, so this one, they use the sentence frame, it was smart when, which is what we're going to kind of talk about a little bit more in a moment. And I'm sorry, I keep going back and forth just so you can see it without the emoji. But this is very asset focused. So they start by saying it was smart when, and then they explain why, because it showcased that the student understood the problem. Then they go on to explain something more specific about the solution. So the student does realize there are 5 groups and each group will have 3 apples. Then they wrote the number sentence. Okay, so this teacher is recognizing the things that the student did well, the things that were smart that the student did, the things they understand. And when you read this, it gives you a clarity about the student's mathematical understandings and maybe where to go. Okay, so you can see the difference. And this is kind of an extreme example, but just to illustrate my point here. Okay, so how do we write a strength-based sentence frame? There are 3 parts, okay? And you saw this in the example. So the way that we write it, and you can use this kind of as like a way to train yourself until it becomes kind of more internalized. But you want to say it was smart when the child said, did, or wrote whatever it is that you noticed. Okay, so it could be a concept, it could be a skill. In the prior example, it was what they did to show they understood the problem. And then you want to provide a justification by using the word because. So it was smart when Johnny said that repeated addition is multiplication because it illustrates that he knows the connection between these two operations, right? That would be an example. Okay, so this is important to use because students can start to see that what they are doing is being valued by you as a teacher, and then they internalize this as a strength. So they're not only focusing on the things they're doing wrong, they're noticing like, hey, I actually have some good mathematical knowledge here, and I can draw on that when I'm trying to understand new concepts. Okay, so I'm going to have you pause right here and practice writing a strength-based sentence frame. All right, so here's another example from our friend here who had the same solution. So it was smart when the child circled the word each, realizing that there is 3 apples in each group because it showcased that the student understands the problem. The student realizes that there are 5 groups and each group will have 3 apples. Then the student wrote the number sentence of 5 times 3, representing 5 groups of 3. So it's a really specific way that they noticed the good things the student is doing, the things the student understands. Okay, so here's another example. Students are given 6 apples and they are told to put them equally into 3 bags. Then the students, without directly counting the apples, are asked how many apples are in each bag. Okay, so you can pause here if you need to better understand the problem. Okay, and then here is this is kind of a CGI generated group that's solving the problem. And you can see that the one with the yellow shirt here is saying, yeah, that's 2 groups of 3, right? And then the brown shirt is saying 2, 4, 6. And then the blue shirt is saying 2 apples, 4, and 2 more. Okay, so the students are given 6 apples and yeah, this is the problem again. So I want you to pause here and just notice what is happening. Okay, so what are you noticing about these solutions? So this is kind of what you'll experience in class is you don't get a full blown solution all the time. You're kind of walking around and listening. Okay, so here are some examples of strength-based sentence frames. It was smart when yellow, so we're talking about yellow shirt, said that's 2 groups of 3 because the student knows the idea of grouping things. It was smart when brown said 2, 4, 6 because the student knows to count up by 2 3 times for the bags. Okay, so you can see the sentence frame there. So it was smart when the student, yellow, said, so we're using that said with the example, and then because and giving the justification. So again, these colors match up with the kind of like protocol that I gave you to construct a sentence. And then we have another example here where you can see the strength-based sentence frame for brown. So I'd like for you to think about here what strength-based sentence frame you can make for the child speaking in Spanish for blue. So I'm going to pause here and ask you to think of a strength-based sentence frame that you can make for them. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of group-worthy tasks and strength-based sentence frames. I want you to make sure you're completing your readings and your watch and read before classes before each class. Continue to review the lesson plan template. You should have by now done your what did I notice? So just keep in touch with me about that if you haven't been able to. Make sure you're coming to class and checking the syllabus. And if you need any help, let me know. I'm here for you. You guys are brilliant. Keep it up, and I will see you next time.